Welcome to the Fragrance Files.
Welcome to the Fragrance Files.
One of the things that people continuously misunderstand about how beauty narratives are formed is that they kind of quickly dismiss how integrated the beauty industry is to all other aspects of life. It is fundamentally implicated in our supply chains around the world that are also linked to pharmaceuticals. They're also linked to other forms of wellness, not just perfumes, but anything you eat, flavors of your food, intricately linked to the perfume industry. And how they're marketed is absolutely linked to how media operates. So, perfume is kind of this nexus point of pop culture, gender, politics, socialization, where you're from, where you live, how much money you can afford, what type of story you want to tell about yourself. All of this is important. All of this gives you context. So when people dismiss it, be like, and they're just like, oh, it's just perfume. They're missing the fact it's linked to every other aspect of their life. They're
Yeah.
only seeing one side of a story that's much bigger than they understand.
Yeah. I had a light bulb moment listening to your audiobook the other day with you, and you mentioned the connection between pharmaceuticals and the beauty industry. And my father had cancer and passed away last year. And
Oh,
you
I'm so
mentioned
sorry.
that, thank you. You mentioned the drug methotrexate, which was the chemotherapy that he was on, and how that is banned in the EU in cosmetics, but not banned in the US in cosmetics. And that absolutely blew my mind. I did not expect to have that connection in a book about the beauty industry, but it was a wild ride for me.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry you had to endure my voice and that whole thing, but
Oh my god, no.
yeah, all things are delicately interconnected, and the things we put on our body and the things that we put in it are obviously sisters, often twins.
Yeah, incredible.
Mhm.
Arabelle, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you introduce yourself for our audience?
Of course. Hi, everybody, friends and enemies. My name is Arabelle Sicardi, and I am a beauty writer. I guess you could say I'm a beauty world builder. I wrote a book called The House of Beauty, which came out in hardcover in October 2025 and is coming out in paperback later on this year, also in October. And I run a nonprofit that archives nail art history called the Museum of Nails Foundation, and also a scent-centered collective called Perfumed Pages. And we do nose trainings and perfume swaps and other things that I feel like hosting, hybrid online and in person. So it's nice to meet you all.
As you mentioned, you've spent years writing about beauty as a culture and not
Hmm.
just as products or just as a business. When you look at fragrance specifically, what are some of the patterns from the wider beauty world that you see showing up most clearly?
I think fragrance is a great litmus test to ideas of gender and conservatism right now. And you can see that in both how much stuff we consume right now and the expectations of how much stuff you should have or consume. You also see it in like the influencers that get the biggest deals or the biggest followings in fragrance talk. I think fragrance talk is an incredible study, an anthropological study on toxic masculinity and how we don't believe women. I think
Yeah,
100% it is incredible, who is revered and who gets no views whatsoever within that atmosphere. It's fascinating to me. Um, yeah, I mean, there's so much going on. I also find it really fascinating now that there's this, I guess it would be a micro trend right now about solar fragrances, this idea of sun-themed fragrances. And I feel like there's so much obsession over like climate related fragrances because the climate is literally dying. And this is something that I've talked about with perfumers as well. Like a lot of really niche indie perfumers are are creating work kind of as a way to articulate their own kind of climate grief. These are not, fragrance house heavy hitter, like quote unquote master perfumers. These are the indies that are building fragrances out of their garages to distribute. And I consider them cutting edge. And these people are really they're going through stuff
Yeah.
around the planet. And I'm like, I'm with you. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think of like Agar Olfactory. You know,
Yes.
their kind of whole story of that collection is around the ecological collapse of the world and
Hmm.
this lens through which it could be these alternate presents and futures. Um,
Yes, 100%.
it's
Augustine, genius. Love them.
I just picked up cereal too.
Yeah, I got the Discovery set literally like a foot away from me. I've been obsessively returning to it the past couple of weeks.
I know it's supposed to make me think about the end of the world, but it just cereal just reminds me of my kids when they were babies eating dry Cheerios.
I love that though. And when you're contemplating the end of the world, don't you kind of want to just be surrounded by the people you love anyway? Like the world flashing in front of you, like you want love more than you want the
Yeah.
devastation. So that makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
not that we needed a tangent on end of the world perfumes, but I do think about Flood by Fishersund.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
I
yeah.
had the immense privilege of seeing the Flood installation in Reykjavik
I'm
and
so
smelling the
jealous.
perfume and feeling the thunder and seeing the and like the immersive experience. We ended up being in there for probably 45 minutes. And something about a perfume that tells the story of the world drowning so incredibly beautifully and so moving. And I love any form of immersive art. I went to all of his other exhibits in the museum and was just in awe. Yeah, we have a lot of apocalyptic perfumes, and they're all pretty great, especially now.
Yeah, I think we're in a apocalyptic renaissance, you know. Sorry to
Title of the
say.
episode.
Oh God, yeah, sorry. Vibe killer, my middle name.
Certainly in the indie space, but I guess in like the designer and like mass appealing, it's like sunshine and rainbows and smell like sunscreen and
Yeah, I do think that there are more large legacy houses that are doing kind of revival archival references now. Like
Mhm.
Coty did that reissue of like their Amber editions or something pretty recently. And there's something to be said about really going into the archive. One, because perhaps you don't see a vision for your future, but two, you're going back to the past because that is the moment, like the moment you were most valued and felt the safest. And I think this kind of self-referential loop is something that a lot of legacy houses get trapped in, and is a kind of artistic struggle that I'm seeing both in fashion and in beauty. Like we're kind of trapped by our own nostalgia because we're also trapped by the kind of inability to innovate very often. And I think that's tied to AI and the current like chaos and inundation of AI taking over every possible means of creation and creative output. It's hard to innovate when you're literally being trained not to think.
Yeah, we were on the digital scent soiree a couple of weeks ago, and
Hmm.
one of the trends that I highlighted for the group was I also noticed this renaissance of these legacy and heritage houses pulling out older editions and doing reissues and tweaking older formulas. And I thought it was interesting how it's tying into another maybe micro trend that we're seeing around like worn in luxury and like reviving. And it's this interesting play on aesthetics of old money in a new way.
Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
had to consider like, are we doing this because people are facing so much economic scrutiny right now that you wanted to reissue this at an accessible price point so they could feel like they were attached to this idea of what luxury was?
It's a great question, and I think the answer is different for so many different luxury houses, right? And some of it is purely that the old editions can no longer be formulated in the ways that they were before because of IFRA and regulations banning certain ingredients. And some of that is completely out of their control, like you get a regulation, you have to adhere. So I give them the grace for that, and that's part of the process of just having a long span of lifetime in which your business is running. And then, but there is also definitely the question of like, how many flankers and reissues and revisions of this one story must you provide?
The ship of Theseus with perfume.
It, it, you know, I have so many Shalimars and I love each and every one of them, and I think the new versions are really beautiful,
They
but
are.
you know, it's sometimes you can have new stories, right? And I think it's brave to try something new. I've spoken to the perfumers for Shalimar, and I totally see why they revisited the way they did. It felt really architectural, the way that she
Mhm.
went methodically into the extraction process that originally happened and elaborated on it. I can understand why they reissued that. But I am speaking to this larger habit of just like, oh, we have this one hero fragrance. Now we're gonna do every single possible version of this fragrance, possibly also a lip balm and like hair mist, and inventing new fragrance categories like milks and just stuff that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
Do we need? I mean, maybe I'm being a hypocrite, being like, oh, there's a lack of invention. Suddenly you're inventing too much. Like, I understand that there's dissonance in these complaints, but there's also, it's still true. Like, do we need a billion trillion products? No. Do we need better products? Yes.
I personally, if I see one more YSL Lieb flanker, I will lose my shit.
Mm.
It's okay. I'll say the names, Arabelle. Don't worry.
I've besmirched YSL enough this year. Thank you for the invite. It was a lovely party. I'm sorry that I did not like the fragrances.
It's okay not to like every fragrance that a house puts out.
Totally.
It's
You know,
okay.
it's totally fine. And I think criticism is part of the process. You need to be able to accept criticism as an artist, as a business, as a human being. It helps you get better. Maybe that's just like the Asian auntie in me that I'm like, no, if I'm too nice, I'm lying.
No, I totally agree, and I think we're seeing with a lot of these brands, and I can name one in particular right now that I think that they're just so surrounded by super fans and nobody who's willing to just say no, this is not a good idea, that they're starting to collapse their own brand. And I think everybody is so desperate to always get on the PR list that they're not willing to be honest. And it doesn't feel like maybe they've hired people that feel comfortable being honest with them either.
You said you could name one, but that sounds like at least a dozen
That's a
It's
brands.
lot. That's an
it's
encyclopedia. Let's be real here.
it's but the one that's coming to mind the most, and I've been debating whether or not to post a video about it because I will 100% get kicked off of their affiliate program, but and I do love them dearly, but I am really disappointed in the direction that Sniff has gone in the past 6 months between Noteworks and now their collaboration with Michaela, which
Mm,
feels, I mean, it highlights that they're not the indie niche brand that we thought that they were. They are, they are big money. They are mass market, and they're making that money, and that
yeah.
controversy sells. Um, but it felt for a very long time like they were very involved in the community, and I think these two decisions that they've made have really put them at odds with their community, and it's upsetting to see because it's a brand that I really genuinely like so much. But I think when it comes to fragrance, there feels like there's this disconnect. Why do you think it is, or do you think it is that fragrance is treated differently and sort of above like scrutiny and criticism as opposed to other aspects of beauty industry?
I don't know if I do think that it's treated with less scrutiny than other aspects of the industry. I think right now we're living in a moment in which fragrance fragrance heads, like of which you and I or and all of us that are listening are definitely, we are freaks of nature. We are hyper consumers.
Yeah.
We're a percentage of the market. We may not be the whole market, and I'm not sure how much of the hyper obsessive culture is the driving force. I think the majority of the consumers aren't perhaps as soaked in the controversies and in the culture and the context of how influencers love or hate a brand for their failings, you know? Like I would say for me, like let's use Sniff as an example. I personally have never checked for Sniff. I'm gonna be so honest. I like
Hmm.
their fragrances have never particularly spoken to me. And I can understand why they chose Michaela because of her, just by the numbers
Oh
in
yeah.
terms of
Right.
her platform. This was a money game,
Oh,
right?
100%.
It
Oh,
was
absolutely.
100% a money game. And if they want to scale, if they want to keep scaling, if they want to get a return on their investments for their investors who demand a certain return, they need to play the money game in order to do that. And Michaela has numbers to back up anything that she puts down, right? Compared
It's true.
to a micro niche influencer who may be beloved, right? Who may have an incredible click-through rate and incredible high numbers for their particular micro niche. But if you put it in every door that Sniff might open, most people would be like, who is this person? It wouldn't make a
Yeah.
difference. So for that, I totally understand.
Yeah.
Um, and for in terms of like, do I think fragrance is like more controversial or whatever than other parts of the beauty industry? I think I see the controversies more as like more rampant simply because I'm in everyone's business in a way that I'm not in other parts of it. Or I'm so used to particular frameworks of disappointment at a corporate level for large conglomerates that have a bunch of different makeup brands or they have a large portfolio. I know how that sausage gets made. And so when people get surprised by disappointments, I'm like, I can't be mad.
Yeah.
Everyone I've ever spoken to from this conglomerate sounds like they live in hell every day. So I can't be surprised at the results here. Whereas fragrance it's a very small community, even if it's a global one, you know? Like at the end of the day, there are the big five fragrance like
Right.
manufacturers, right? And then everyone else outside of that is a different operator, but it's so small in reality. Once you know certain master perfumers or you know the big five houses, kind of know the landscape really quickly, and you know the retailers across the world. If you know that really quickly, you see this labyrinth is not that invisible, and everyone in it is a person, and a person is fallible. So there's just always going to be gossip. There's always going to be drama. But I don't think the average consumer gets caught up in it as much as I do.
We want to know all the tea.
Yeah.
Right. I was going to say, like to your point, our audience is not the casual fragrance consumer.
No,
Yeah.
we're all freaks, and that's great. I love that for us. But I also know that, like, like audio discretion is advised. Like, most people will not be caught up in the bits and pieces and the lore of each person involved in how they get their fragrance.
One of the topics that kind of came to mind that we wanted to broach with you was the rise of air quotes clean beauty and the natural fragrance realm. Um, it just hitting hard and fast. How did the industry become so obsessed with purity? And that has so many different permutations.
Because it got red pilled into making America healthy again, baby. We went down the wrong chute. We went down the wrong way.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, ultimately, the long and short of it is I on an individual level, there's several like vegan and clean fragrance and beauty brands that I think do a great job. I mean, I don't have a list of them to provide, but I think the curation at Credo is great. They know what they're doing there, and there are certainly some fragrance brands that are, you know, vegan and have all of these sustainability claims, and I'm like, yeah, you also just like make fundamentally good juice. Like,
Right.
I love your claims, love them. I could, personally could care less at this moment in time. I look at the juice, I see it, and I smell it for what it is, and you can tell me all of the backstory later. Um, but I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's a lot of precarity, particularly in America, where people don't have access to consistent, good healthcare. And so they find ways to try to come to terms with their chronic illnesses and the lack of care that they experience in any way possible. And sometimes that means like they look into endocrine disruptor research, of which fragrance is tied to. There is research and studies around fragrance being tied to endocrine disruption and this and that. And it's not it's not a lie. It's just a lot of people misinterpret or don't understand the scientific claims or the lack of depth of fragrance research, honestly, which is always changing, where olfactory research as an academic practice and a landscape is really expanding at a rapid pace now. And some of the stuff we know in the past couple of years, we didn't know even 5 years ago, right? But there's a lot of fear mongering in how we take care of our bodies and what we should put into them and how the things we put on them affect ourselves. And sometimes people get caught up in a whirlwind of misinformation or bad science interpretations, and that happens in fragrance sometimes. And you know, people people will believe things that confirm their own biases a lot of the times, and that happens in fragrance. It happens with, people that don't believe in, you know, the people that are really obsessed with pasteurized milk or non-pasteurized milk.
Oh
I
yeah.
don't remember,
Yeah.
and
Raw milk.
yeah, raw milk and, living on a farm, even though, they've never lived on a farm before. This kind of pathway of conservatism and if I can't pronounce this ingredient, it shouldn't be in my body type of stuff. Like, oh, if it's natural, it's the best for me. I'm like, there's plenty of natural poisons, but by all means.
And I think that's an important distinction too, is when we talk about the clean beauty
Hmm.
and purity, there are brands that strive to be vegan, that strive to
Hmm.
be sustainable, that
Hmm.
have very grounded, legitimate claims that they can and should verify.
Yeah.
And then there are these other kind of fluff branding and misinformation pieces where it's either misrepresenting science or blatantly misleading in their marketing to
Hmm.
sell on this idea of wellness without actually investing in care.
Yeah. There are a dime a dozen, I would say. And I feel really bad for the average consumer who is expected to take on the role of researcher and FDA, essentially, at any point, because the reality is the industry is almost self-regulated in comparison to other places, you know? And something simply because something is available for sale doesn't mean it's safe to use. The amount of fragrances I've seen being sold on Etsy that I would never put on my body is large. There's
Yes.
many. So, and there's very few ways for people to understand the amount of casual danger that's readily available to them. And some of the methods that people use to understand these things, like the apps that promise, oh, if you scan the barcode of this, we'll tell you everything about it. Some of them are, lobbyists themselves, and they make a financial gain or benefit for fear mongering you or guiding you to specific products. So they're not exactly pure heroes either. It's a hard landscape to navigate, I'm not gonna lie.
It is. I think it's a great moment to remind our audience that one of the things that we always recommend, because all of us, are huge proponents of the indie fragrance world. But when researching a new indie brand, it is really important to go to their website and make sure that they have IFRA information on their website and make sure that they are IFRA compliant. If they are not IFRA compliant, you should not be putting them on your skin, period, end of story.
And if you find yourself attached and they don't have IFRA compliance, at least the bare minimum, if you're going to go dangerous path, is ingredients and allergen warnings.
Because many natural ingredients have allergens.
As we mentioned in the last episode with LC, beautiful, amazing fragrance mix Triple X by Eris has natural ambergris and hyraceum in them. As beautiful as it was, I got head to toe hives.
Oh
I had to go
no.
get some shots.
Beauty is
So,
terror, unfortunately.
you've talked a little bit about how the consumers having to do their own research often is a losing battle.
Hmm.
How did we end up with such a nucleation point in fragrance around natural ingredients, this fear of synthetics, and then, like you said, this misrepresentation of hormone disruptors, of pheromones, of false wellness claims? Like, there has been so much of it that showed up in the fragrance industry in just a very short period of time. And
Hmm.
is it because it's percolating and proliferating through the beauty industry, or is fragrance the nucleation point?
And it's inevitable because of what's been happening in the larger beauty space, but also just in the larger cultural space. We have a we don't really have an FDA or a CDC anymore in America. Like, let's be honest. There's a dead worm in someone's brain, and he's telling us we can't get vaccines. So, not to put a fine point on it, but there's not a lot of guidance or regulation in any space regarding bodies, let alone fragrance. So I'm not exactly surprised that the misinformation has trickled down into this particular space either. Um, it was going to happen, it's inevitable because it's inundated every other aspect of society, you know? Vaccines are getting rolled back, or uh, and the national fellowship for like science researchers or whatever is being like delegitimized. So uh, yeah, science is becoming a question mark in America, and that will inevitably is inevitably reflecting in fragrance, because fragrance is a science and a chemistry that relies on manufacturing and paperwork regarding chemical safety. And if you put question marks around science itself, it will lead to question marks around beauty, because beauty is a cosmetic science. So,
It's a downer, guys.
I know. Oh
This
God.
is it's a series, but we have a really joyous, whimsical series after we
You just gotta
destroy
make it
everything you
through.
love about the industry.
You just gotta endure.
It's important to know these things going in and like just set your frame of reference for what's actually happening, and it makes it easy to see through the bullshit because a lot of these companies, I mean, they see this happening and they see that people want these clean, non-toxic ingredients and they will throw their money at it because
Hmm.
even though nothing has changed about their formula, but they know if they put that unregulated term of clean on their product, they will get your money a hell of a lot easier and they will open themselves up to a different audience that maybe they didn't have before. So,
Yeah, I think it is really tied into our fear of getting older, the dismantling of science and healthcare and belief in the fact that these exist. And it's also tied to our latest obsession with longevity and body hacking and stuff like that, which I've written about,
mhm.
because all these endocrine disruptors and all of these things that are supposed to keep you pure and stuff are just bargaining chips to try and make sure that our bodies are as healthy as possible, right? And as pure as possible. And it's really easy to believe marketing, and it's really hard to understand who to trust. The reality is, it's never been easier to start a beauty brand than it is right now. You know, like you could get an AI generated perfume like formula and send it off to some filler really quickly and get it done in a matter of literally days, and to have AI generated art, everything AI generated, customer service AI, head to toe, everything is code. You could have that really quickly. You could even tell it, oh, make it a clean beauty brand and it'll make all these promises for you. And it would be easy. It's really easy to be a bad person. You get benefits. You get more benefits for being bad than being good now. That's why there's so many,
Yeah.
so much class disparity. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, we're just at an inflection point where we see so much filler right now, and I think hyper consumers are becoming very well versed in understanding what is filler and what isn't. You know, you have to be really good at understanding it. And it's something that I talk about with the Stell guys and with like my fragrance group chats all the time. Like when you smell so much fragrance so frequently, you begin to develop like this kind of this third, I don't know, sixth sense, sorry, of understanding what has been like AI perfume or not.
Hmm.
There's
Yep.
just something derivative that you just pick up. And I would say like at least 8 out of 10 times that I'm like smelling blindly through like a bunch of fragrances, I can pick out the fragrances that are from like some AI filler house and they aren't from like a person who's like compounded it themselves. And it, we're all developing these instincts. It's just a matter of toning, like of honing it in and practicing and understanding what's human and what's not.
Yeah, I think it's hard for people who are not as obsessed in the fragrance world as we are to pick up on those little things that,
Hmm.
when we're smelling fragrance for a living, it becomes almost second nature to pick up, when something is not it's not doesn't have that almost rough, ragged, sort of edgy thing that an indie fragrance that somebody actually spent time composing
Hmm.
has. Um, but I think, for people who are just starting to see the signs, this is why we talk so much about AI in past episodes.
Hmm.
If a brand is using a ton of AI images, they might be real fragrances, but there's a hell of a lot higher chance that they are AI fragrances and they are fill bottles. So it is always the first red flag for me.
Yeah, if they're using it where it's visible, they're certainly using it where it's not.
Let's talk a little bit about raw ingredients. So, in your book, House of Beauty, you take the reader on a journey through realities of raw ingredient sourcing, which I loved the way you structured those chapters, just as an aside. But why do you feel natural ingredients are framed as inherently virtuous?
Because the history of rare ingredients has so much to do with commodity fetishism and class distinction. And the fact that I mean, the history of fragrance is all about class. Like, fragrances were never really a commodity for all people. Fragrances were made for the bourgeoisie, for emperors, for kings, for people that can afford them as a means to distinguish them from everybody else. Like, historically, time and time again, that has been true. There have been fragrant materials that are available for everybody. Like you got incense and stuff for prayer and for rituals and stuff. That's absolutely true, and they've been around very long time. But the very core materials like oud, like myrrh, like ambergris, and these very expensive ingredients, they've always been expensive, and they are the foundation of how these countries and empires became wealthy. They were the traded goods alongside, oftentimes alongside enslaved people, and they were the commodities that were traded along the Silk Road, which was also called the Incense Road and the Spice Road. These were fundamentals to how the supply chain that we know today as a global experience, they're fundamental to how it was made. So they've always been valuable. They are the foundations of what we even understand as currency. They were expensive and rare before we had even invented Christmas as an idea.
Right.
They're old as balls. And they remain expensive commodities, even if they're more easily accessible to the market today. And frankly, they're only going to get more expensive, these natural ingredients, because they're going to disappear soon. We are actively experiencing water bankruptcy as a globe, as a planet. And that is obviously going to affect how we live on a day-to-day life, and it certainly affects the ingredients that are available on the market for every industry, including perfume. Um, Sandalwood will probably disappear within the next five years, and there's other ingredients that will disappear, because of climate bankruptcy, perhaps sooner, perhaps less, but we are on a time limit of natural resources. And I don't think most people really understand that. But people that operate in the fragrance industry, the farmers and the producers and the perfumers, they kind of get a up close and personal view because these are their artist palette, right? And it's changing faster than we can really comprehend. Harvests have collapsed from being, months at a time to like weeks, right? And synthetics are moving at a really hyper speed. Like we have a lot of synthetic ingredients, and that's great innovation, but it's also innovation because we are in crisis. And at a certain point, and I think it will be within our lifetimes and perhaps sooner than we would want to realize, our the vanities that we have, the perfumes right in front of us, will be wildly different in 5 years because the ingredients are no longer available. And most people won't
Yeah.
really realize that, but that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah. And it's so interesting to me that, we see synthetics and we see a way to you know, stop destroying our planet for ingredients, stop exploiting people for our ingredients, but to the greater consumer of fragrances, it's like no, synthetic bad.
It is frustrating, but I think it's a great bridge point for conversation.
Hmm.
It's a great moment to test people's assumptions and just be like, why do you think the natural ingredient is better? Who is it better for? Because the reality of these ingredients is like the natural stuff takes up so much water. It takes up so much natural resource and so much energy. And when you put down the numbers of the cost that it takes to get a certain ingredient, and then you see the synthetic version, the science is usually going to support using the synthetic ingredient almost every single time, right?
Sure.
Because it costs the planet less, and it costs less water, it costs this, that, and other thing less. And so I appreciate being able to have that conversation with people. And the science is changing all the time, and how we innovate is changing all the time. And there are innovations within farming and stuff that are happening. There's small wins within this space. Yeah, it's we're having completely different conversations, like the perfume industry and the world at large, when it comes to precarity, when it comes to sourcing, and this, that, and the other thing.
So we've heard about how synthetics are bad, natural is good, natural is better, natural is pure, without considering the historical, colonial, and imperial histories of extraction and exploitation, both in the way that they started, but also in the current way that they're still harvested. It's like every year you get another article about how jasmine is being picked by children. And every
Yeah.
time someone's like, this is terrible. And then they spritz on their jasmine perfume and they go
Yeah.
back to their life. And it's like, yes, maybe the synthetic is missing a little something. Maybe it's not quite there, but like it is better for the planet. It doesn't involve, well, the synthetic itself doesn't involve exploiting people, where that synthetic raw ingredients also come from. We can continue down that path.
Yeah.
Um, it's this bizarre idea. It's like the whole thing around quinoa and how like it was suddenly better, but it like destroyed the Bolivian climate. There's
Yeah.
this disconnect between natural is good when I can reach for it on the shelf with no consideration for its supply chain.
I think I put a little bit of that onus to like the word synthetic being sort of a dirty word on. I put that on the influencer a little bit too, because how often do you see somebody smell something and say that they don't like the way it smells because it smells synthetic? And is it because it smells synthetic? Because is your nose actually capable of picking up the difference between a synthetic versus a raw material? Or is it because you're smelling a fragrance that is very cheaply made with very cheap ingredients that are not good quality even as synthetics?
Yeah, I mean, half the time what they're smelling is like linalool, right? That's like in
Yeah.
everything, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, you smell a note that reminds you of cleaner, but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's a synthetic.
And
Yep.
synthetic can also be used to approach fragrances in a very interesting way. There is La Première Peau, the French brand that I personally could not vibe with because their DNA has this very unique, structured, purposeful syntheticness to it. It's meant to be ultra modern perfumery. There's the one
Fascinating.
that has shishito pepper and tuberose that's like an autopsy. It's like purposefully very sterile.
That's disgusting.
And
I want to know more.
They're
yeah,
insanely gorgeous bottles too.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but like when you describe something synthetic that way, you're giving people a frame of reference for it
Hmm.
versus saying, this is synthetic, bad.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that everyone could stand to develop their smell literacy, right? That's so much of why I really love that there's an uptick of olfactory education across different skill sets. There's different classes that you can take at different levels at Institute for Art and Olfaction, right? Different organizations around the world are doing smell clubs to go over different fragrances. Emma has her smell club as well. And, like, yes, I do nose training too. And there's different places where you really have to sit with ingredients and compare them to final products because it really does help you understand what you have in front of you and what you have and what you see and smell around the world. It kind of gives you more context to understand. And there's that really beautiful zine, I think called Smell Worlds.
Hmm.
Sorry, Smell Words.
Smell word. Oh, I love smell
Yeah,
words.
and I love it. I think it's a great educational resource as well. And I mean, anytime I see an educational resource around fragrance, I pick it up. It's the easiest buy for me because being able to find just the right word and be precise is such a pleasure. And I know that's because I'm a writer and I'm obsessed with the little details and nitpicking. But when you are able to perfectly pin down the smell reference to where your brain is at, I think you feel a kind of connection that helps you center yourself to the world around you in a way that I wish I felt far more often than I do. It's really hard to stay connected to the world and not feel terrified by it and overwhelmed. And so every time I find a moment of complete recognition and synchronicity, and it comes from smell, I feel a little closer to the universe. And I'm like, yes, thank you. This is a blessing. It's the best.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about like the raw ingredients themselves,
Hmm.
and they are precious. They have historical weights, they have cultural weights, and then there is this much darker side of their actual extraction and exploitation.
Hmm.
But we also see outside of the conglomerates, we see indie perfumers and niche perfumers that are really revering these ingredients and trying to show them for all of their history, for all of their meaning. Do you think there's a difference between appreciating the materials and fetishizing them?
Totally. But I can't be the police about either one, really. I have to be, I'm careful about that. I think so much of it comes from whenever I'm really curious about if it's fetish or reverence or devotion, I'm the type of person like I will simply call up the perfumer. I'm very much Chris Jenner, where like, what would happen if you just called her up? Just call him up. And I recognize that most people can't do that, but you can certainly ask questions to the brands and be like, so what's your personal stake in the story that you're telling? I we'll give you an example. I find it extremely weird that there's a lot of new Asian perfume brands on the market now, and they're all using European white perfumers to perfume. I think that's a huge wasted opportunity that really buys into this narrative that European classical modern perfumery is the gold standard to adhere to, when you could you could take a chance on your own people and offer fresh context and a fresh dialogue and dictionary to the olfactory landscape. We do not need you to go to Firmenich to make a perfume. I would like to see where you come from in your fragrance brand. You don't need to translate immediately. Like, some things resist translation, and that's okay. That's kind of a pleasure. If there's a little friction in the new audience, that's an opportunity for the audience to grow, actually. So I find it really sad when I come across a new house that I'm like, oh, cool, you're from China. You're gonna show me all of this legacy and fragrance, and then I look and I'm like, oh, it's another old French guy. Cool, great. I got enough. I don't got enough of those.
Yeah. And even down to the language, like why are we still using the French terms? Why are we still saying extrait de parfum? Why are we
Yeah.
saying maison? Like there was one brand, a Nigerian brand that I like when I looked at the translation and I was so relieved. I think it's Ili oh my goodness, Ili Olomu, and they're a Nigerian brand, and it translates to House of Ilumu. And I'm like, yes, please put
Yeah.
this in your natural language. We don't need to center France again, even in your fragrance naming. But I
Yeah,
digress.
100%. I think that the idea that there has to be a fragrance center that we all revolve around is the epitome of self-colonization. It
Mhm.
is such a missed opportunity for understanding that fragrance is a collective experience, and there doesn't need to be a center in the collective. It can operate like a rhizome. It can operate like trees. They're nodes of meaning and context, and each is beautiful without comparison. It does not need to be compared. We do not need to revere the oppressor, you know? Like, France, grass got rich off of colonies, colonial forces and laborers, and some of the first perfumers that ever came up in fragrance, their families are still in it. They are truly, no one can speak of Nepo babies stronger than the fragrance community. I really do mean that. Because, like, yeah, you have, like, fashion houses that, they come, you got Nepo babies in fashion, for sure, 100%. And I've hung out with all of them. But when it comes to perfume, perfumers have like multi-generational Nepo baby goes hundreds of years back in a way that is very literal. And they got into perfume because their grandfather was in perfume, and their grandfather got into perfume because they were a general that was sent to New Guinea or something, and suddenly they are dealing with fragrance materials. It's a very literal colonization legacy in fragrance. And so the more that we resist it and resist the structures that make it seem inevitable, the I feel like the better off we are as a society, understanding that there doesn't need to be a center for there to be value, and things don't need to be translatable easily to everybody. You don't need to make a fragrance for every single person. You don't need to make the biggest, most successful fragrance in the world. You just need to make something unique.
I love that we're talking about this when I have the only French perfume I've ever purchased from a French heritage house that came in today sitting beside my computer.
Yeah, he's like, I heard you talking about me.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, over there, gotta put
Yeah,
you on my train a little bit.
yeah.
Well, if you
Yeah.
wanna self-correct, I definitely recommend you trying from Iliolome the verdant one because it smells like unripe green plantains as you're like breaking and peeling the skin back. And it's Certainly not for everyone, but again, it's one of those fragrances. If you get it, you get it, but it's so true to who they are.
Yeah.
So if you wanna self-correct a little bit, Josh, you should sample that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one of like my hyperfixations right now is also like smelling through different versions of durian in fragrance, even though
Mm,
durian is obviously a very polarizing fruit for everybody. And I'm just having a really fun time hunting down different durian notes in fragrances and how fun and horrific and surprising and sweet it can be. I will never eat durian. Actually, like I've had it, it's fine. I don't think the smell is particularly worth enduring for the experience, but I'm having a really fun time understanding the opportunity of it as a fragrance note. And it's the Asian perfumers operating on their own houses that are doing like the coolest job of it right now,
hmm.
which I'm not surprised by.
Have you smelled from Voyager, the Thai house? I think it's called Golden Hour.
Yeah, I think it's so
Ah,
beautiful.
the first 5 seconds of it have this really intense durian note that makes it smell like the mango is almost rotting. It's so ripe, but it's gone in 5 seconds, and you're left with the most like juicy, ripe mango and sticky rice fragrance. It is wildly cool. I love it.
Yeah, I have to agree with Arabelle. I have tried durian. It was an experience. The flavor is fine. I just don't think it matches up to the effort. I do love right. I do love Black Dog by D. Gray. It uses
Mm,
that like damp stink of durian to bring this really interesting animalic to the front.
Yeah.
It's almost like a platform to bring up the bass notes. I think it's very interesting.
Damful has a durian note in one of the new fragrances as well. I don't remember which fragrance it is, but I loved that that was in there. I mean, Damful's line in general, I think is so beautiful and cool and weird.
so
So
good.
I'm so glad that it's made it stateside.
Did Jake let you smell the sample of the new one that we're getting from Damn Fool?
I
The
think
egg
so.
tart one?
Yeah, I can't
Oh my
wait.
God. It's phenomenal and so eggy and salty and dense. It was exactly what I was hoping that mooncake was going to be from Danam.
Hmm.
I wanted that salted, really yolky egg, and it just came off like caramel to me. So it was really refreshing to actually get that.
Yeah, when it comes to denom, like there's like only two that I really love. The Japanese whiskey one is gorgeous, and I think the Chinese calligraphy one is really cool too.
Those are my two favorites, actually. And but I will never own Japanese whiskey because why is it the only one that's in a gigantic bottle that costs $300?
I know. And of course my sample from the Discovery set arrived like broken. So it's like my favorite one and it had like literally one
No.
drop in it and I like snorted it like it was precious and it's gone now forever.
Tying that back in, though, we've kind of been. I love that we ebb and flow in these
Hmm.
conversations. We have to get serious and vibe kill, and then we got to build up cool
It's a
stuff.
roller coaster. Yeah.
Yeah. We have so many perfumes at our fingertips at any point. Anyone with an internet connection can get almost anything they want. What do you think there should be in the transparency for a consumer to say, this is something to investigate more, or let me move on?
It's a great question. I think as long as there's like the IFRA compliance in there and they understand what allergen factors may or may not be there, um, that is the bare minimum floor of what any fragrance should have. Like this, I get this question all the time about like what you should look out for and what you shouldn't. And the reality is that changes based on your own personal politics and praxis about what you consider to be an ethical purchase. Some
Yeah.
people really want to know if there's animal byproducts or cruelty free, and I think having all that information is really fair too, 100%. It becomes complicated in fragrance when people are like, there should be like no animal stuff if you don't want like ambergris or you don't want any like any animal byproducts. That kind of eliminates a huge section of quality, like of quantity of ingredients, and that's totally fine. If you don't want to deal with them, you don't want to deal with them. When I was doing research for, supply chain stuff, I realized how really hard it is to get top to bottom transparency and clarity from every step of the process. And it does really seem like a don't ask, don't tell situation for a lot of perfume brands who may not actually know where their ingredients come from. So I think the bare minimum customers should ask for is just to make sure that they're IFRA compliant. Because IFRA spends a lot of time going through all of this research on behalf of the consumers and the producers and everyone. So you don't actually have to become an expert yourself.
That was one of the things that I thought was a really interesting answer from Victor from Zoologist when I interviewed him.
Hmm.
I asked around, what are his opinions on sustainability in perfume,
Hmm.
and he was like, "That's not really my area to care about."
Hmm.
Each of the perfumers that make one of their perfumes has their own moral compass and their own ideology around sustainability. So when they're developing that framework and that perfume and that formula, they decide at that point if they're going to go that route or not.
Yeah, it's a moving target. We're not operating on the same page when it comes to these things, consumer to consumer, and certainly perfumer to perfumer. Everyone's different. I have this conversation about sustainability and the idea of like a truly clean fragrance all the time with perfumers. And a lot of them are like, there is no clean perfume. You cannot make one. It is impossible. And others are like, well, I'm gonna try my darndest to make it happen. And more power to them, but it is a continuously moving target. And just like science, like I expect changes and delays and false starts and disappointments because the system is not set up for a perfectly pure experience. There's no perfect perfume that will harm no one at any point, that has not cost the world anything. That's just simply not how it works. It's built on extraction from somewhere.
Yeah. And I think with what I want people to understand too is that when it comes to the term clean, unlike vegan or organic or, I mean, cruelty free, there's governing bodies that set a standard for that you have to meet to get that sort of labeling on your packaging, right?
Hmm.
There is no such thing when it comes to the term clean.
Hmm.
You don't actually have to pass through any test or any governing any sort of agency to be able to get a clean label on your product.
Yeah. All of these labels, like organic and vegan and cruelty free, there are all sorts of different organizations that you submit your product or your paperwork to, and then they can look through it. You may pay them a nominal fee, and then you are allowed to use those badges. Like the Leaping Bunny certification
Mhm.
is one of them. Um, if you're really interested in like a really comprehensive version of like business practices and clarity, if you find a brand that has certified B Corp, that is actually a really good sign because B Corp certification is quite rigorous. It's really comprehensive in terms of how they treat their employees, their financials, this, that, and the other thing. It's a really structural um, process. So you can look up these different things. I've reported on the sustainability industry over and over again in the beauty industry, and there's new organizations that pop up all the time and new badges and certifications. So if you see one that you're curious about, you should totally chase that curiosity down and see if it's legitimate or not, because you will be surprised by how easy it is to just make up a website, make a badge, and start charging people money. Lots of clowns driving cars here.
Do you think that ingredients lists make people feel less anxiety about something even if they don't understand it necessarily?
No, I don't. I wish that it comforted more people. I think that because of the rise of like Make America Healthy Again and this idea of like resisting difficult science terms, an ingredients list, at least in fragrance, is almost meaningless. People rely on it and then they get freaked out because they don't understand the terms. And it's I think it's really difficult for brands to even get a come a, to translate the fragrance notes in a way that consumers really get, because most of the time fragrance consumers don't actually know what notes they like. They think they do, and then you ask them really, and you give them different things, and what they thought that they liked is not what they like. I mean, Mishi, you probably understand this very intimately
Oh
because
yeah.
you do consults all the time with people that walk in. So you know far more than I about like, oh, you think you want a floral, but actually you hate that and you want an oceanic fragrance instead. Um, yeah, no, when I was doing the research for the book, it's like people were, I noticed, and I was talking to dermatologists and all of these things, sometimes people get like phobias of things that they don't really understand. It's like why is there's more people trying to make their own at-home sunscreen because they think that somehow they know better than the science. That's not the case ever, ever.
I
So,
do, and this is probably a personal bias, but like if I
hmm
look at well an ingredients label and I see linalool,
hmm
coumarin, and it has like the actual breakdown of what is in the formula.
hmm
I don't know what each of those chemicals smell like. I know a
hmm
few of them, but I am like, oh, okay. Versus when I look at a label and it's like alcohol, scent ingredients, or like fragrance.
Oh my God, I
That's when I'm
have
like,
not seen something that big ever. I feel like I would call the police.
oh, I've seen it, and I'm like, what do you mean
What do you mean?
fragrance?
But what do you mean? Yeah, no,
Goodness.
What
100%.
is it?
Yeah, I feel like the bare minimum any fragrance ingredient list should be is like five things, right? I mean, come on, you need some stabilizers in there. You have your denatured alcohol, your perfumer's alcohol or whatever. I know how the general thing is made. If you don't have the bare minimum skeleton, I get concerned. Yeah, I saw a video on TikTok, or no, I deleted TikTok. So I saw a video on like Instagram the other day, and it was like someone making their own homemade ingredient, like their homemade perfume, and they put like a literal like orange rind into the
Oh my
jar and then
god.
like a cinnamon thing and then like shook it up with like mysterious juice. And I was like, that's gonna become a mold experiment in the next day. Not
You
even,
shared
yeah.
you shared that one in the group chat, right?
I
I was like,
did. I was ugly
no.
laughing. I was like, I have to curse you with this knowledge. I'm so sorry.
There is a brand on Instagram that I have seen pop up quite a bit that does this like mic I think they're marketing it as like micro batch perfumery, and they show
hmm
themselves making one of the compounds that's in a perfume.
hmm
But every time it is very much like that 5 minute crafts, like I take a slice of chili pepper and pound it with this mysterious white powder and then pour it in alcohol, and now it's an ingredient. And every time I'm like, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
I'm not a chemist, I'm not a perfumer.
Oh,
That's not how
yeah.
this
Oh
I
works.
love that they're doing that so you know what not to buy, though. I love that. I love it so
god.
much because telling on yourself is really important, you know? And that helps me help myself. But also, there's just that's a great point in which I do wish more legitimate, so to speak, houses offered more of an inside look on the labor of this process. I know Homage does a great job at it, but certainly they can afford to because they got lots of money. But they are doing a good job in terms of showing the intricacies of like the distillation process, and I love that insight, and I think it's a great educational tool for both perfumers and for the everyday person to like clock that everything that goes into these perfumes takes so much time, so much labor, and it's such a heavy process. It's not magic and it's not a
It is.
potion.
There's one brand that we carry, Ordio Labs, who they make a lot of their own oil and tinctures, and their social media presence is very small, but all they have on their social media is videos of them distilling and reducing their oils and tinctures, and it's so fascinating to watch. And I agree. I wish more people would show the process so that we actually understand. But going back to your point about like after consulting people on purchasing fragrances, it's changed the way I shop so much because I don't care about notes anymore in a fragrance. I care about ingredients, sure, but I don't care about notes anymore. And on the rare occasions that I go shopping and somebody's trying to sell me something and they're like, what do you like? I'm like, I like everything. Just show me
Yeah,
Right.
what you think is the coolest. Like, my nose is a whore. Just show
same.
it all to
I'm
me.
like, show me your freaks first, baby. Show me the freaks first. Bring the freaks to the front. And they don't think
Love it.
I'm serious. And I'm like, no, I really mean it. Show me your least popular product first.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I think brands get nervous when I ask them that. I'm like, I want to know what doesn't sell, what means the most to you, but maybe is not translating to your audience. That's what I want to smell.
Or if I walk into a perfume store and you can see all of the little tester bottles, the one that's the most full, I'm like, either it's they've gone through an entire tester and it's brand new, so this is very, very popular, or this never gets touched. Either
Yeah.
way, I should give it a sniff to see where we're at.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like just like wines for me. I'm like, I want your weirdest wine, please. So it's just the most interesting stuff is often the least legible to the mass consumer.
When we talk about perfume, both as an art and as an industry, where do you see the possibility for real change?
I think change is possible at every single level. It's really dependent on the collective agreement, though. I think that consumer behavior can change and will change. It's because of, finances, because of recessions, because of buying power, that changes for sure. I also think that indie perfumers are the pioneers of innovation and artistry, and that large houses, like the big five, like the filler factories, they also revere the artists that are not within their system, and they really do hunt for the weirdos and the freaks because they admire their bravery, and they do reference all of the niche brands all the time. And I wish that they were braver, and I think that they are becoming more curious as well. It's just finding the right clients for them that allow them to be a little weirder is difficult, which I understand because it's a lot of money that goes into these things. But I think that consumers in general are ready and willing to be surprised, and that we're seeing changes in an expansion in fragrance categories already. We're seeing more and more niche and independent fragrances becoming more relevant and more popular and powerful on a global scale, and I love that. And we're seeing more opportunities for olfactory education at all levels everywhere, which I also love. And I think continuing that and continuing to connect and to be curious and critical and caring as both a consumer and as like someone that's in the industry is really important. Like we all have power to collectivize and to ask for more and for better and to build solutions together and be like, did you have to do that? No, you don't have to do that. You can choose differently. We all have that opportunity to choose differently at any point in time. And yeah, so I know that I'm a very much of a buzzkill and a feminist killjoy when it comes to talking about stuff in this episode, but I really do want to emphasize that there's so much possibility at every level. There are innovators that are trying their best to, save farming infrastructure that are trying to preserve rare ingredients, that are trying to replicate them, that are trying to honor legacy ingredients, that are trying to find new ways to tell stories that are, and there's perfumers that are innovating with so few resources and are doing an incredible job that they become global sellers quite quickly. There are these stories. They're romantic and they're beautiful and they should be supported, even and especially in the face of all of the despair. So I really want to hold those two truths at the same time. Like we do have devastation, we do have overconsumption, we do have filler, but we got brave weirdos, we have curious collectives, and we know more than we ever have before. And all of that is important together.
Thank you so much for your time this evening.
Yeah,
Of
thank you so much,
course.
Arabelle. I could listen to you talk forever.
Eh.
Well, closing ritual. What are you wearing right now? What are you excited about?
It's the new damn fool. It is Chua. It's Old House, and I got it at Stell the other day. And I didn't know that it was related to a house before I got it, but it did feel appropriate given House of Beauty, and it's like a story about like going to your old family home and realizing that, new people live there and it's a different story and there's incense and it's just so strange and discomforting, and actually because it's discomforting, I find it very comforting. It's not cozy, it's a bit disturbing, and I'm like, yeah, just, that's exactly what I want. I love
Yeah.
it.
Oh, such a cool house.
Yeah.
I am wearing No Suits. So this is a newer brand that we got in, and I'm wearing Been Trying to Meet You.
Mm.
This is such a cool brand. They're out of the UK, and the one of the partners is also a sculptural artist. So the cap is an abstract nose, which I love. Um, but they're kind of like equestrian in their fragrances. Like the
Hmm.
one Hides is like very barnyardy,
I love
grassy.
that one. I was wearing that the other day. It's so
So
cool.
good. This one I think is the probably easiest wear of the three,
Hmm.
and it's this really gorgeous like honeyed hay that almost leans kind of licorice to me, but I don't believe there's any licorice in their ingredients, but there's something about it that feels almost like eating salted licorice in like a field of wildflowers, and I find it so comforting. Yeah, they're also
Love.
really
I'm into
really nice
that.
people who listen to the podcast, so shout out to them.
Yeah, they're so sweet.
I've been looking at hides. I'm gonna have to get some samples.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I started my day with Cloak Musk by Scent Trunk. It's one of my all-time favorite fragrances. And then telling on myself, I fell in love with and ended up with my first French perfume, and it's 45 Degrees by Trudon.
Nice.
It's
It
like
is a
a
good one.
beeswax, honey, vanilla. There's something very carnal and
Mm.
sensual about the way it presents vanilla that I destroyed that 2 ml sample in like 4 hours and was like, oh, okay,
Not
I
four
haven't liked a
hours.
fragrance this
Wow.
much.
That is decadence.
Yeah, I have not felt that strongly about a perfume in a while. And I felt a little weird about buying it, but I was like, you know what? I got it.
A good
You deserve a
perfume's a good
treat.
perfume. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Arabelle, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and thank you all for listening. We
Thank you
love
for
you.
having me. Have a great night.